should you have done? Ask a question. Awesome. How many of you asked a question when trying to, oh, look at that. Okay, if you asked a question, that means you're on the right track. You're thinking about how to have a conversation instead of how to monologue. You don't want to monologue or lecture. We want to have a conversation. So you ask a question. Generally speaking, the first question you ask is, what do you mean by that? So you would want clarity or clarification as to, well, when you say that thing, when you say conflict, what do you mean by conflict? Help me understand what you just said. Because so many times, you know this, you do this. Someone says something, makes a statement, asks a question, and then they're waiting for you to respond. And in your mind, you already know what they mean, and you're ready to just attack and just go after and like, well, let me tell them. And then you realize, oh, I totally misunderstood what they were trying to say. I totally got they asked this question, and I thought they asked this, and I answered the wrong question, and they just look at you like, what are you doing? So instead, we train ourselves, all right, I wanna ask questions. I wanna know where you're coming from, what you're thinking, and how did you come to that conclusion? And then we have an actual dialogue that can be fun. It can honestly be fun, where you can have completely different views and you're like, we don't agree about any of this, but hey, I enjoyed that. Like, you wanna I'd be willing to chat with you again about this. And that's the goal, is that you have conversations, not lectures. So with that said, I'm now going to lecture you. No, I'm gonna present, and then we're gonna have some Q&A, some conversation, in some interaction. Okay, so you have your notes. Here's what we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at, we're not looking at science and being like, well, here's the science we like, here's the science we don't like. That is just a never-ending trail that we will just get lost on. Instead, what we're looking at is, when we think about this debate or disagreement of faith and science or religion and science, what are we really talking about? So we'll look at where we differ, and then where things are where we would say we are absolutely in agreement. Okay, here's the first thing. There it is. The conflict between science and religion here's the answer to the question, what are we really against, is a philosophical power play. What we're debating is science right or wrong? What we're getting into is a philosophical discussion about the nature of the world. It's actually a bigger conversation than science. So the conflict is not science and religion, but rather competing philosophies about the nature of existence. Science, we can say this, is not equipped to disprove or prove God. It's not equipped to. It's not even its role. It's not supposed to do this. We could see there are limits of science. Science deals with observable, measurable phenomenon. It relies on empirical data, which means it can only make conclusions about the physical world. Science can only make observations and conclusions and test that which has physical properties of some sort, physical or energy of some sort, but there has to be something that can be measured. If it can't be measured, science has no way to make any judgment or present any kind of empirical data. We'll look at some examples here in a second. So the immaterial realm, so things that we would refer to as the supernatural, such as God, souls, miracles, etc., is not within the scope of science inquiry because these are non-material or immaterial realities that cannot be measured or tested with the scientific method. This is the age-old thing, criticism, oh well, if you get God in a lab, if I can measure him, then I'll believe in him. Well, hold on, what are you talking about? There are plenty of things that you cannot measure in a beaker, that you cannot observe in a lab, that we would all say, well, we know they exist. We know they're true. We don't even know why or how, but simply just because something isn't physical doesn't mean that we can't prove it. Here's an example. Science can explain the physical processes that occur in the brain, but cannot measure or prove the existence of consciousness, a self-aware immaterial entity, essentially ourselves. This has been a debate long-standing in what is consciousness. And we just take it for granted, right? The famous philosopher Descartes said, he said it in Latin, cogito ergo sum. You know what that is? You don't know what it is, but you know what he said. He said one thing in his whole entire life, and that is, I think, therefore I am. So his philosophy was, I'm gonna doubt everything and reduce it to its like life to its ultimate, like the ultimate reduction core of what I know to be true. And he says, all right, the only thing I can be sure of, absolutely, if I doubt everything, is this: I think, therefore I am. Because I have consciousness, because I can think, I exist. I don't know what I am. I don't know. This body might be an illusion, but I am something because I can think. Now, when we talk about consciousness, there's movies on this and papers and books and what is consciousness. And science, when we say the word science, what science can do is it can measure electrical impulses in our brain, but it can't say like, there's consciousness in that spot, right there in your brain. Yet we're all conscious. And we are aware of ourselves, and we are aware that we do exist. And nobody would doubt. Like, I saw a thing, there was a paper written a little while ago, and it says that some bunch of scientists who said, we don't know what consciousness is, but we know what it's not. We don't know what it is, but then they said this: we know it's not a soul. They just make a statement, and you're going, how do you know that? How can science prove anything about something that's immaterial, right? A thought, or the fact that the fact that we're thinking about these things. So science can't measure immaterial things, such as an emotion. You and I, we experience emotion, and maybe you can trust your emotions, maybe you can't. Most often, you probably can't. But they are real, like you have genuine emotion, right? If you have a family and you have loved ones, you have people in your life you love, you say, I love you. All right, now, measure how much you love them scientifically. I don't know. How can you even begin to do that? So science can only give us data and measure things which it can observe. And again, like in the physical, with regard to the physical properties, material or energy. Anything outside of that, science has no input on, has no discussion, has no thoughts, so to speak. So some philosophical assumptions. Modern science, especially in 19th, 20th centuries, has often been framed by materialism, the belief that only physical matter exists. So if you, for people who will say like, I believe in science, I'm not a faith guy, I'm not a religion guy, they'll say this: I believe in the material world, and that's it. This is the Carl Sagan, in the beginning was the cosmos, right? And that's all there is. All there is, all there was, all there ever will be is the cosmos. That's it. And so this is often referred to as materialism or naturalism. We'll use them kind of interchangeably. The real conflict is not science versus religion, but naturalism, the idea that only the natural world exists, versus theism, the belief in a supernatural God. Now, here's the thing. In either of these worldviews, naturalism or theism, science has a prominent place. It's not science versus God. It's not science versus theism, as though like as soon as you believe in God, you withhold all thoughts about science. That's crazy. Instead, what we're talking about is competing worldviews, a philosophical perspective. So the limits of science, we could say is this. Think of it like this: weighing something with a yardstick. You ever tried to weigh something with a yardstick? Of course not, right? So if you were to, here's the example. You can't weigh something with a yardstick. Yardsticks measure length, not weight. Similarly, science measures the physical and empirical, but it cannot measure immaterial things like consciousness, or in this case, the supernatural or the divine. It simply is the wrong tool for the job, if that makes sense. So you can't use science to measure something that is immaterial. And when we talk about God and the supernatural, like we see in the New Testament that God is spirit and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and truth. Okay, now that might not be true. We don't but it's a statement about who God is. And maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. Of course, I imagine if you were in church and like following Jesus, you believe that to be true. And like that's where you're convinced that's true. But simply saying it doesn't mean it's true. Instead, though, what we have is a statement about God. And we say, all right, so for those who believe in God, they believe that he is spirit. All right, we understand that he is spirit, which means science is the wrong tool to measure who he is. Does that make sense? All right. The misapplication of science. Science is a tool designed to study physical phenomenon, matter, energy. When it tries to comment on immaterial phenomenon, God, souls, even consciousness, it is outside its scope. It is the wrong tool. It's why when we talk about like the big questions in life, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? When we think of like, when we ask questions like, why is there suffering? The people that you go to get answers to those questions are not scientists in lab coats. We go to theologians, we go to philosophers, we go to the thought leaders and say, all right, help us understand meaning and purpose because we know that you can't measure this. In fact, a scientist will say that that's beyond my pay grade. The why questions are beyond my pay grade. I'm just gonna tell you what and how. So the central point, when someone argues that science disproves the supernatural, this is the truth every time. They're simply misunderstanding what science can actually do. It's not science, whatever we think of as science, whatever science is, it's not science's job to give us an understanding of the divine, of the supernatural, of the immaterial realities, even the ones that we all know and agree on. Even an atheist will say, yes, I'm conscious, and we have consciousness. But we don't know what it is, where it comes from. We can measure responses to like our brain signals, but we don't know like what's causing that, like what makes you and how you can think. Okay, so science's role in understanding reality. Science and empirical data. Science excels at helping us understand the how of the natural world, but the why of existence and purpose often falls outside of its reach. It can explain why something reacts to something else. So it can give the reason for this chemical reaction, so to speak, but not when we think of why as in meaning or purpose. Science can study the process of evolution, but it cannot answer the question of why life exists in the first place, or why is there order in the universe. Science can help us observe those things, but it is simply silent. It is neutral when we think of, yeah, but why? But why? Even the question of like, how did life come to be? Or how is there order in the universe? It's just simply accepted as, well, it is. And we can go through all kinds of different theories as to why, but there's no measuring the why. Does this make sense, right? Okay, number 3. This is often something that's brought up with regard to us faith people, us religious kooks, that we believe in the God of the gaps. Have you heard this before? So the God of the gaps is this, the idea that we only invoke God to explain things we don't yet understand scientifically. This is often criticized as a fallacy because it relies on ignorance rather than evidence. Meaning, before Darwin, we needed God to explain the origin of life because we didn't know how it could have come, we don't know how we came to be. Darwin comes And he shows us at least on a micro scale, the evolution of the finches and their beaks, and then extrapolates that to, well, I wonder if this is how it all happened. Like it's all just over time, genetic transformation of species into other species, and hence the theory of evolution comes about. And people at that moment, like during that like explosion of thought, we don't need God anymore because we needed him to explain the origin of life. Now that we have Darwin who helped us understand it, we don't now, like Nietzsche says, God is dead. We don't need him anymore. That's this idea of we only needed God because we needed him to fill in the gaps. As soon as we fill in our own gap and have a better understanding, we don't need him anymore. And that he is simply something that we cry out when we don't have the answer. All right. So opponents argue that using God as an explanation for unknown phenomenon is just a placeholder until science finds the answer. Have you heard this too? There's been plenty of people, even well-known atheists who also are either scientists or biologists, Richard Dawkins being one of them, who hold to this and say, well, we don't have the answers to everything, but science will one day give us those answers, and so we don't need God. Even if we don't have the answer, we trust that eventually, at some point in the future, science will give us the answer. Make sense, right? So we don't need God. We don't need this God of the gaps to explain the things that we can't yet explain. One day, through technological advance and our own scientific understanding, we will be able to have answers to these big questions. Okay, how do you respond to this? Anybody gotten a conversation with someone and they're just like, you just believe in the God of the gaps? Has this ever happened to you, or had this conversation, or you thought through this stuff? Okay, nobody's raising their hand. All right, we'll just skip this whole section then. No, we're not gonna skip this, because this will come up. This might even come up in your mind of like, wow, yeah, like sometimes it'll people will say like, well, you just use God as a crutch. Like when you have something you don't know or understand, you just say, well, I just believe, just have faith, just believe. So how do you respond? Okay, first, this fallacy is circular. This argument assumes that naturalism, only natural causes, is true, and that science will eventually explain everything in natural terms. This assumption is not proven by science, but by philosophy. Again, this is a philosophical position to say science is all there, the material world is all there is, so therefore science eventually will unlock the secrets to all things that is life. Now, not to get too like philosophical, but science itself cannot prove that premise, that all there is the natural order. All that exists is material in the natural world. That's a statement beyond science that then limits science. Does that make sense? Like you can't even use science. You say, all right, all that exists is the natural world. Okay, all right. How'd you measure that? Prove that to me. Prove that to me scientifically that all there is the material. And guys will hem and haw, and then you say, okay, now let's just talk about things that are immaterial, all right? Like emotion, like love. Like when you the thoughts of when you think of your fondest memory, or a memory of a loved one that has passed away. Those kinds of things. All right. What are those? Those aren't material things that you and I can measure. And we can say like, well, it's just things, it's just our brain, it's just electrical signals in our brain. And we can absolutely go that route and say like, well, we are simply then just byproducts of the chemical reaction that's happening in our brain. And here's the logical, like the end conclusion of that. If that's your worldview, which most of these guys, that's where you land because all that exists is physical. Okay, if that's true, then where you land and where a lot of these guys end up going philosophically and even in like and even in their own happiness is this: there is no actual meaning or purpose in life. There is no such thing as love or hate or justice or injustice. There is no wrong or right. There just is. In which the response is, hey, I totally understand that. But yet, our experience and the world around us is that there is love and hate and right and wrong and justice and injustice, and those are either real things that we should fight for or against, depending on which one, or it's all an illusion in which we can't trust any of it. Sometimes your lights just turn off. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if are we done? Is that already over? Wow, that was fast. So if all that exists is the natural order and the material world, of which, though, we can't even prove if that statement is true scientifically, but let's just philosophically, we take that at face value. It means every emotion you've ever felt is just simply your body producing chemicals and producing electrical signals in your brain, making you feel things, but they aren't real. So when your spouse says, honey, I love you, you say, your body just told you to say that. I know that's not real. That's where this ends up going. All right. The appeal to evidence, not ignorance. So rather than being based on ignorance, appeals to the supernatural causes are based on what we would say is evidence. If evidence points to a design, it's not a gap, it's a legitimate conclusion. So if we say, like, we go through the argument for design or the origin or how we came to be, any of the things where we go, oh man, all right, there's so much design, it points to a designer. The fact that there is anything instead of nothing points to that something started this. And what is that something, right? Simply having those kinds of conclusions and thoughts is not God of the gaps. It's saying, no, this is a logical conclusion based on the argument and the evidence that we have. And so whatever that thing is, so we exist in space, time, and matter. So whatever started this whole thing we call the universe, whatever started the Big Bang, whatever started everything has to be outside of those things, right? It can't be matter creating matter, because where did that matter come from? Where did the first matter come from? It has to be something, ready for this? Immaterial, that started. Matter came from nothing, so there had to be something before matter, and whatever that is, by definition, can't be matter. It's immaterial. We exist inside of time. So whatever started time, whenever time had its beginning, whatever that looks like, however that is, something outside of time had to start time. Does that make sense? Right? And so this, whatever this is immaterial, it's timeless, and it's outside of our universe, and it has to have some sort of intellect or will, because if it's designed, whatever started this, designed it in such a way that everything works. All right, so one of the, again, Richard Dawkins, one of the leading, though I don't know if he's leading anymore, the atheist, he's since softened, actually, surprisingly. I should have brought a clip. There's a clip of him that is fascinating that I should have brought, and maybe some other time. His whole thing is, well, just because the world looks designed doesn't mean that it is. So he's going out of his way to say it looks like it's designed, but it's really not. Now, he wrote The God Delusion a number of years ago, and since there's been a number of books after that in response to that. Recently, I think this was last year. Are you guys aware of kind of his softening position? He, on an video show, he called himself a cultural Christian. And that he likes the culture of Christianity. He doesn't believe in Jesus and all that, but he called himself, and you're like, hold on, what? I mean, he got a lot of flack for this, of course, from the atheist community, because it's like, you're our guy. You're like the guy. And you just called yourself a cult, like even just 1% Christian, like a cult, like he's like, I enjoy Christmas. He's like, all the things that happen with Christmas, I love the carols and the songs, and it's like, you're the guy who came out so hard, and now it's like, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. And he goes on and continues to say, I prefer a world with Christianity than a world without it. And you're going, wait a minute. But if it's wrong and like all of this is just made up, even if that's the case, he still recognizes, yeah, but I kind of like it. It has a purpose. So like when we talk about like having conclusions that it isn't God of the gaps, like I'm honestly, I've thought about this and read so much, and I'm not a Christian because like, oh, I can't explain this, so therefore it must be God. I'm looking at this going, man, I know my theology of who God is not 100%. I know I'm wrong somewhere. I don't know where. I know I'm not, my theology cannot be 100% perfect, but as I stand up here, here's where this is my understanding, and this is based on the best explanation of all the evidence. Here's where I am, this is what makes the most sense, and like, all right, here, and I'm sure God will continue to grow me and change my thoughts and instruct me, and I'll have a better understanding of who he is. And so are you. You're growing in your understanding of the immaterial, of the divine, of the supernatural. You have not arrived. You don't have a perfect theology. Now by definition, though, not one of us in here thinks we're wrong. Like, you don't hold beliefs that you believe are wrong. You hold them because you believe they're right. And you have beliefs now that you didn't have in the past. And you had beliefs in the past that now you're like, man, I was wrong. Which means your future self will look back at your current self and go, man, I was wrong on that too. But all that said, that's true of everyone. We are all like, quote unquote, evolving in our understanding of who God is and what life is. But that doesn't mean, simply because we don't have, it doesn't mean we say, well, God of the gaps, I guess I don't have all the answers, so therefore God. You're like, no. I'm working hard at trying to have my best possible understanding of who God is and what he's like and what this world is like. And I'm not appealing to the God of the gaps. Does that make sense? Like, this is not an uneducated position that I've taken. And I hope you haven't either, where you just go, I'm only here because, my mom dragged me here. Like, that's probably my kids. My kids, they're not here tonight, but usually they come. Side note, you wanna hear a quick family story? No, you don't. Okay, let's move on. At the last First Wednesday, my family came. They sat right over here. It was my wife and then my youngest son, who's 13, and I think it's fair to say this wasn't his thing. Sitting for an hour listening to Dad talk more, and so they go home, and my wife tells me later. She goes, "You know what Sawyer told me?" And I'm like, "No, do I want to know?" She's like, "No, it's funny." She goes, "He said, Dad has the most boring job on earth." Like, wow, thanks, son. Like, it's awesome. So some of you might be in here and you're like, yeah, that's where I'm at. This is the most boring thing ever. All right, for those of us who are like here and you're going like, I really am trying to like better understand who God is. This is not a God of, this is like the conclusions have led us to this point. This isn't a God of the gaps where we say, well, just have faith. You just gotta believe. I don't wanna just believe. I need some kind of evidence. I need some kind of like, it's gotta make sense. Naturalism of the gaps. Now here's what's interesting, right? So the same idea of the God of the gaps, here's what you could see, here's what I've shared with some people before. I said, don't you just suffer from the same illness? Instead of God of the gaps, you just say science of the gaps. Natural, like one day we'll have an answer. You're appealing out by faith to the same unknown future answer that I am. The same logic that criticizes God of the gaps can be applied to naturalism. Just because science hasn't explained something yet doesn't mean that it will find a purely natural explanation. So science doesn't have an answer to the origin of life or even the why we're here or how we're here. But it also is just as much a leap of faith to say, but one day it will. Based on what? But like, how can, like, based on what? Like, based on what evidence are you saying, well, one day we'll have all the answers to everything? Well, hold on. Again, this is a philosophical decision you've made in your head that science is the answer to everything. Here's what you've done. You replace God with naturalism, and instead of God of the gaps, you have a naturalism of the gaps. I can't explain it now, but one day I know science will. I might not even be alive for it, but one day I believe. Man, you sound a lot like a person of faith. If we find evidence of fine-tuning in the universe, appealing to a divine designer is not filling a gap, but providing a legitimate, well-supported explanation. When we think about the order and the design of the fine-tuning of our world, all of it points to, man, there seems to be something or some force or some mind of some kind that set this all in motion. That's not a God of the gaps. That's allowing ourselves to go where the evidence takes us. Science and religion, okay, historical partnership. Now let's talk about this idea that science and religion are diametrically opposed. All right. Religion, we could say, was the science starter, not the science stopper. That is a line from Greg Koukl. He talks about this, and he talks about God, that religion is the thing, he calls it the science starter, not the science stopper. The historical narrative that religion has always been in conflict with science is simply inaccurate. You say like, well, religion's always been anti-science. Well, hold on, wait a minute, okay? This is now classes in session. Now let's talk about when we think of science. Pioneers of modern science were Christian. Many of the founders of modern scientific disciplines were devout Christians who saw their work as uncovering God's rational design to the universe. They saw their job as trying to figure out and discover and ascertain how God designed this place. These weren't men and women coming from a place of the God of the gaps, but rather, all right, we have certain assumptions that everyone has. Atheists, scientists, people of faith, everyone lives their life on some sort of assumption. Some, like we all do, and we take them for granted, and they're unscientific and they're unprovable scientifically. For instance, would you like to know one? There's hundreds, thousands, millions. Okay, here's one. Here's one assumption that everyone, including the atheist scientists, will accept as true, whether they can prove it or not. Ready? It's better to know more truth than less truth. That is a value statement, a philosophical statement that everyone will agree with. Yeah. Should we know more about our world or less? We should know more. All right. Why is that better than not knowing more? Prove it to me scientifically. Show me, measure it. Well, no, that's just an underpinning. All right. Here's another one. Ready? The laws we measure today, right now, or in the past, will be the same, will be constant, and will be the same laws in the future. Whatever they are, right? Speed of light, the law of gravity, all right. All of those things, we're like, oh, we can measure those. Okay, we assume that they will be the same in the future. We don't know. But that is a foundation of which science is built. That, all right, whatever we can measure and prove today will be the same tomorrow, assuming it shows a pattern of it being constant. All right. Those are assumptions that we live on, right? Okay. These guys work on a set of assumptions. Their set of assumptions was there is design to this and that we can actually discover truth in this. And so they do. Now, when we say these guys, we're not talking about like just some random dudes. We're talking about the guys, like the names that you know, like their last names, and you're like, oh, like we know their name, right? Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Newton, Boyle, Pascal, like all these names you're going, I mean, they like started like the modern scientific revolution. These are the guys who are in all of the textbooks, like all of the science books, these are the guys. Okay, all of them were Christian. Every one of them believed in a creator and that they were trying to discover or uncover like more things about God. Isaac Newton believed that studying the universe helped him understand the mind of God. I read this week, that Isaac Newton wrote more theology than he did science, but we just know about his science writings. And so he was all the devout believers. Kepler saw his work in astronomy as discovering the order set by God. These are the guys that like set it off. Boyle, the father of modern chemistry, a committed Christian who believes science revealed God's creation. Okay, so this idea that like, well, religion has always been anti-science. The founding fathers of our modern scientific understanding were all Christians. Like, if they were here today and you go like, so you're like anti-science, right? And they're like, I'm kind of like you guys are gonna read about me later. I'm discovering like all of the, like me and my buddies here, we are literally writing modern day science in our understanding, and we're doing it from a Christian perspective. What do you mean? What do you mean science and religion can't coexist? So Christianity and the rise in science. Christianity, especially in the West, provided the theological and philosophical framework that led to the modern development of the scientific method. These guys, understanding who God is and even the constant of life, and that there is an ability to ascertain truth, objective truth that is always the same, come up with the scientific method. The scientific method is based on a set of assumptions. That if you do an experiment and you control the variables at one time, you can replicate the same thing and get the same results. That's a philosophical assumption. You don't know that. You know what I'm saying? Let me give you an example. I think I've shared this before, but we'll do it again. On your way here, you got into your car and you started your engine. And your past tells you that when I turn the key, or for you fancy people who look down on the rest of us, you push your button. Or some of you walk up to the car and it's like, welcome, Brandon, where do you want to go? And you're like, oh, okay, George Jensen. And based on your past, you assume and think every time, like, you're not like, I wonder if it's gonna start. I wonder if my car, until it doesn't. And you're going, oh, dang, right? My life just stopped. Now, that's like a silly example of how we just take for granted things. But in the scientific world, all right, the things that based on what we've done in the past, we assume that they'll be a constant in the future. We measure the speed of light. We know the speed of light. Okay, 100 years from now, we believe the speed of light will be the same. Now, we don't know until we get to 100 years from now, and we can actually measure it. But science is based on a set of assumptions that the things that are constant now will be constant in the future. Again, these are philosophical decisions that everyone has, that everyone makes, and it's not even scientifically provable. All it can do is observe, but he can't tell you the why. Early scientists believed that a rational God created the world in an orderly fashion, making it possible for humans to study and understand it. They came from their set of assumptions was that this world was created in order and not in chaos. That God did so with on purpose and with design, and so it can be studied. We can uncover some of the things that God has set up. Okay, now the misconception. Let's look at this. Religion has always been at war with science, or you can say in conflict with science. All right, this narrative is new, right? Because again, the fathers of the scientific revolution, all of those names, they were Christians. They were not even just like theists. They were followers of Jesus. They were Christians who are doing this. And so this idea that religion has always been at war with science, well, we know that's not true, because the guys who set off the scientific revolution, they were religious men. So this narrative originated in the 19th century. There was two books written by two guys, John Draper and Andrew White, and they talked about specifically, and they use this language, I can't remember the title of the book, but it's something like the natural order of the world at war with theology, or war with religion, something like that. Like, that's a book that they wrote, and all of a sudden it took off as like, oh, yes, this is religion versus science. It paints science as being in conflict with religion, and especially you and me, right? Assuming you're a follower of Jesus, especially with Christianity. It's the worst of them all. Early scientists were not opposing God, though we saw this, or Christianity, but saw their work as complementary to their faith. That these guys said, a few of them said, the way I worship God is by studying what he has made. It's an act of worship. This is not Christianity versus science. The real conflict, there is a conflict. The real conflict arose when materialism was imposed on science, turning science into a philosophy that rejected the supernatural explanations and restricted inquiry. I remember I went on a guy who came here and was coming to church and would say, I think he would say he's a follower of Jesus, though not like the rest of us, and is like kind of like changed his views and understanding, and it's more allegorical and less literal. And I'm like, hey man, I get it. I totally understand. All right, so he goes, can I meet and can we talk? I'm like, yeah man, let's go to coffee. And he turned me down. He said, I don't want to go to, can we not go to coffee? And I'm like, well, that's one strike against you, okay? You're on my naughty list, all right, but fine. What do you want to do? And he goes, can we go on a walk? Sure. I kind of wanted to sit inside with coffee, but we'll go walk along the river, right? And so we did, and it was great, and I let. It was a great conversation, and I haven't walked since. No, and one of the things that he brought up was I have a hard time believing in the resurrection of Jesus. And I don't know if it's literal. The science in me and it makes it hard to believe, but I think of it more as a story and how God can take the bad things in our life and the dead things and make them alive. And it's probably more of the Jordan Peterson route where it's more allegory than it actually is literal. And I said, okay, all right, I get that, man. And I said, just so you know, I too believe that there is some symbolism there, and there's it's certainly more than just a story, but rather it is the power of God to make dead things come alive in our lives as well as Jesus. Now, that being said, I also believe a literal resurrection. I believe that both are true. And I get that can be a hard part. Now, tell me, how do you think, I said, how do you think this whole world came to be? He's like, well, I believe God created it. I said, okay. What's the harder miracle here? That God raised Jesus from the dead, one body, at one time, or that God created everything out of nothing? What do you think, what do you think's harder? And he kind of laughed. He's like, all right, I see your point. And I said, now, if God can do the hard thing and make everything out of nothing, isn't it child's play for him to go, I'll make one more dead thing come alive? Isn't it easy for him to go, I can take care of this? That might be him calling right now. Tell him I'm busy and I'm not walking anymore. And see, for him, like his whole thing, and now listen, it wasn't proof that wow, Brandon, you must be right. Jesus rose from the dead. But it was rather like, hey, listen, you're coming from a presupposition that dead things stay dead and that they don't come back to life. Yet at the same time, you believe in some sort of supernatural. All right, so something outside of time, space, and material made all of this. All right, if that's true, then wouldn't it be easy for him to do the rest of the miracles that we see? And there was like a block in his mind of like, the rational part of me won't allow for that, because he started going down this route and realized, and when we'd explain, I'd go through like, what we're talking about is not science versus religion, man. I go, I'm a science guy. Like for fun, I read science books. Like I remember when I'm just a weirdo. I remember in high school, to get ready for exams, I'm like, I'm just gonna go read a biology book. I'm like, not even the school book, just an extra book, just for fun, because I'm like, I wanna learn. Like, I'm a science guy. All right, and yet, And yet I still hold to, but the material isn't all there is. So it's not a either, this is not an either or, but rather a battle of a philosophy of material or naturalism versus this idea that there can be something supernatural. Supernatural just means above or outside of the natural. So call it supernatural or supranatural or outside of natural, all right? That's what we're talking about, all right. So what we're talking about, again, is a philosophical battle between all that exists is matter and material, or matter and material exist and also the supernatural or outside of matter and material also exists. So the conclusion, okay, embracing science and faith. So this is now where I hope where this is where I land, I hope where you land, okay? So key takeaways from what we're talking about. Science is not capable of ruling out the existence of God or the supernatural because it's limited to only studying the physical world. As soon as we come to the conclusion or the statement, or at least make the proposition that God is not, that God is spirit and not natural, not within nature. He is outside of nature, or he is outside of the material, outside of time, outside of all of the things that we are limited to. That means science can no longer make a decision or an observation of whoever or whatever that thing is. It's outside of science's ability to measure that thing. Science is simply not capable of measuring, does God exist or not exist? It has to plead the fifth and say, that's not my discipline. You're gonna have to talk to someone else. I can't measure God or the supernatural, because all it can do is measure the natural. The perceived conflict between science and religion is actually a philosophical battle between naturalism and theism. It's not science versus religion. I hope even after today, whatever you think about like what I'm saying, you at least understand, no, this is not like Christians versus science. If that's your take, like, no, I'm a man of faith, I'm not a man of science, I'm like, why do you have to pick? Shouldn't you be both? So the battle is not science versus religion, but rather the philosophy of naturalism versus theism. Science and faith have historically worked together. Many early scientists seeing their work as a way to understand God's creation. That throughout history, some of the brightest scientific minds we've ever known were also religious. And the God of the Gaps argument is a flawed critique being based on assumption about naturalism rather than the evidence. That science will give us all the answers, so we don't need anything else. All right, final encouragement, okay? I'm gonna give you two. And they are both wonderful. They're both bangers. I wrote these and it's great. If God created this world and the laws that govern it, then science should be celebrated, not vilified. If you as a Christian hear the word science and you're like, ooh, science, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. The issue is not science. Now, if we're talking about the philosophy of materialism or naturalism, yeah, okay, now we have something to talk about. Like, yes, that is where the battle is. But to say, I'm not a science person, like, no, if scientists say it, I don't believe it. What? How can that be true? Here's the next one, okay? And if you don't agree with that, you better agree with this. God believes in science, so should you. If you and I got to have a conversation with the Lord right now, he would say, I kind of created the laws that govern everything. And you're saying you shouldn't believe them? That they're somehow I'm wrong, or that it's being unfaithful to stand on the order that God has made this world? All right. Okay, some questions to discuss, and then we'll do some Q&A and we'll just have some fun. Okay. Why is it incorrect to claim that science has disproven the existence of God? This is what you're going to discuss at your tables. Number two, how does the historical development of science challenge the idea that religion and science are at odds? And how would you use the God of the Gaps critique in a conversation with someone who believes science has answered all questions? Okay, for the next, I don't know, number of minutes or so, we're gonna discuss at your tables. And questions that maybe come up, you can write them down, or questions that you have, and then we'll have a time where you can ask questions and we'll do some Q&A back and forth. And I promise to give you an answer, whether it's right or not, you'll have an answer. All right? No, I'm just kidding. I will give you only correct answers, always, forever. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. At your tables, you can go through each one of these in order. You can pick one, or you'd be like, I kind of like that one. Let's talk about that one. And you can do it at a table if you want to buddy up and do a group of 2 or 3 and have a couple, whatever you want to do. But do this. I'm going to assume that some of our tables don't have, like, you don't know everyone. So introduce yourself, hey, I'm so-and-so. And then ask a question, answer the question, have a back and forth, go for it, all right? Okay, by the way, these questions are meant to discuss, not for you to go, what do you mean by incorrect? Well, what do you mean by science? No, don't do that. Don't like anger everyone at your table and like, dude, we're not calling on you again. All right, have a real discussion and trying to answer these questions, okay? Ready, go.
dance now. Let my heart that once was shattered rejoice. Let my light that once was dimmed down shine out. Let that garden snake's lies be unmade and water flow.
All right, we're going strong. A few more minutes. You want a few more minutes? Or are you done? Some of you are like, please don't let us talk to each other anymore. All right, I'll give you a minute. So even as I talk, everyone's still talking, which means you're ignoring me, which maybe you really want to talk. So I'll give you a minute to wrap up your monologue, okay? 1 minute. All right. Okay, good. Wrapping it up. Had a great conversation, right? Solved all the world's problems. Good job, you guys. Good job. Okay, so this is now kind of the fun back and forth. So if you have a question or that either maybe it was at your table or just you personally, just raise your hand. We got 2 people with microphones going around. Here's the deal. You got to talk into the microphone so we all can hear you. You can't say like, I don't want a microphone. If you say I don't want a microphone, then we don't want to hear from you, okay? So you got to talk on the mic so we can hear you, and then we'll go for it. Now, some ground rules. It's not really ground rules, but all right. For you guys, listen. It can be tempting to believe I know everything there is to know about everything. I get it. I totally get it. So if you have some like super intricate scientific question about mitochondria and it's like, okay, I don't know. I don't think of me as like the science answer man right now. So if that's you and you're like, I've always wanted to know, what this gene is in charge of, like, I don't know. If you ask that question, that's fine. I promise you I will make it up. But if you have questions, legitimate questions about like, how do I engage or how do I have conversations about this thing, or someone asks this question or brings this up, this topic, like what's something I can like think about or help me understand, that is like, man, that's awesome. That's great. So does that make sense? Especially with this one, like we can get really into the weeds quick on like some really specific scientific, thought or discovery or advancement and be like, so what do you think about that? Like, I don't know. All right, now, if we want to talk about how do we think better on these things and how to have conversations? Awesome. Or a question like, someone asked me this once, I don't know how to respond. Awesome. All right, great, let's do it. Does that make sense? All right, did I just get rid of all your questions? You're like, oh man, I was gonna ask him a deep question about genetics. Like, okay. All right, now, that being said, I might know some of the stuff. So, all right, let's go for it. Okay, if you have a question, throw your hand up and then we'll just kind of, people who, here we go. And then anyone else, throw your hand up too, and we'll get a microphone going around and great. All right. Look at that, out of nowhere.
Real fast, what was that last name? Carl, what's his name? The atheist? Sagan.
No, Richard Dawkins is the one.
I'm sorry, Dawkins.
Yeah, the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins.
Thinking, Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
I had seen this video where just a handful of years ago where they were asking him a question about evolution, it was. And my understanding is that in order for an animal to turn into another animal, new information has to be put into the DNA in order for that to happen. So they asked him point blank, where is the scientific proof for this new information? We can't find it. And then his turn, I mentioned it here, was that, well, we feel that life on this planet here could have come from another civilization from outer space. And so the question was put to him, well, where did those aliens come from? So they caught him. His mind just went, well, we think that maybe they could have come from another alien race. And I'm just dumbfounded because he's supposed to be super smart and stuff. And I'm like, but that doesn't even make sense. So when you're talking about the philosophy and how they put in their own biases into the method of science and stuff, so that's, as far as I can tell, I mean, that's their religion. Just like they have to have just as much faith to believe that we came from aliens than I would have believing that there is a supreme God who made us. It takes, to me, it seems like it takes less faith to believe that than it does for scientists to believe where we came from. And I don't know, that just seems logical to me. I don't know about you.
Okay, so is your question, Brandon, what do you think? Yeah, okay, good. I'll tell you what I think. All right. So, all right. So Richard Dawkins, I don't know if he. This is the, to my knowledge, this is the only answer he has stated. So therefore, it probably is the one he believes. Though he says, I don't know. It could be. So when you say that, like, I don't know, I don't have the answers, but it could be this. That means that's probably the one you're leaning towards, right? And so he presents this thing. It's called. The actual term for that is called transpermeation, or that life has been transported here from somewhere else, right? Transpermia is what it's called. And there's logical reasons for that, though not maybe physical ones. Okay, so the logical reason is this, that genetic mutation happens at a particular rate. I don't know, don't quote me what it is, but it takes X amount of generations for a particular gene to modify and to mutate. And then for that gene to then, through survival of the fittest, through natural selection, become the new gene that survives better than the previous version, so to speak. All right, so genetic mutation happens at a certain rate. And if you go from single-celled organisms to now us, you need X amount of time, right? You do the calculations based on the amount of mutations that would have to happen from single cell to us, and the amount of time, like the time that it takes for genes to mutate, and there's not enough time in this universe for that to happen. So the logical conclusion then is, all right, then maybe life was jump-started here from somewhere else, and so we shorten our clock. Right, so the existence of the universe is around, they'll say 13-ish billion years old. All right, that's not enough time for the genetic mutation. Okay, so then this is why they'll say, well, it could be that life was planted here and it got a head start. It didn't need as much time to develop, and it could have come from another superior race that then planted life here. Now, that sounds crazy. For two reasons. It is. But also, it's plausible. Now, we don't know. Who knows? And I say it's plausible because, and then there are some who will think that they are future human race, like us, 1 million years from now, that would have the technology to do that, right? Okay, so for instance, it seems like, I know that we're not supposed to talk politics, and there's probably certain names you're not supposed to say, and so here we go. Okay, there's a guy named Elon Musk. He was a name you could say before. Now I guess he's anathema. You're not allowed to say his name. Elon Musk talks about being an interplanetary species and we're gonna go to Mars. All right, we wanna colonize Mars. We are doing the very thing that we are criticizing or saying, like, how could that be? We're going to another planet to start life. Now it's our life, we're not starting life from the beginning, but we're like, all right. So on a larger scale, a race that is undiscovered, unknown, but just logically, it makes sense. There could be a race that is so well developed that they can actually create new life on other planets, and did that as like, for who knows why. An experiment, could be we're all just pets and they're just like, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens over there, right? Let's just do it, right? Who knows? Now, it's plausible in that, all right, you could see that being a thing, that a race that exists, that is a million years in front of us, ahead of us. Like, think of the technological advances of our human race a million years from now. You can't even imagine what that would be like, right? We're just in the tens of thousands of years. A million years at this rate with AI and genetic like discovery and stuff, like who knows what we'll be able to do, right? Theoretically. Now, so it's plausible. What you have to ask is, though, all right, but again, and you go down this route, and my question is, yeah, but aren't you taking that on a level of trust and assumptions just like I am? Like, at some point, aren't you saying, this could be the answer? Just like I'm saying, hey, this could be the answer, right? And in a sense, okay, ready for this? We're both right. Life was started here by another life that's not on this planet. We agree with the story. We disagree on who that life is. That we were transplanted here, so to speak. Life started here by our creator. All right, the story's not so unsimilar. The difference is we look at the creator of our life and say, no, that's the creator. And he's just saying, well, there's not enough time, so we'll go to another human race or another race of civilization. But the problem is the same. It's the dominoes. Like, okay, but where did that race come from? Well, who knows? But in time, science will give us the answers. You're like, oh, you just kick the can down the road. You don't have an answer, so you just say, I'm just gonna punt. Someone else will figure this out, maybe later. All right, so it's a dodge. It's a very elaborate dodge. Does that make sense? Right? All right, good question. All right, great. And when I say good question, like your question was, Brandon, what do you think? That's a great question. That's a great question. I love that question. So, all right. Anyone else want to know what I think about something that they think about? No, just kidding. Oh, I see the hand right there. Yeah, right over here. Great.
So my question is, I work in a medical laboratory, and I see all my coworkers, or a lot of them, wearing things like "In Science We Trust" and "I Believe in Science" and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All day, I'm surrounded by it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's the best way to initiate conversations with
Easy.
these people?
So easy. So easy. Okay? You're gonna get a bumper sticker. And it's gonna be a Jesus fish eating a Darwin fish. And then you've won the argument. It's over. You've done it, right? Just honestly, anyone have that on their car ever? Like when that was like a thing? Did you guys, anyone do that? It's okay. We're not gonna shame you. It's okay. Okay, no, nobody, good for you. Okay, so the question is how to engage or how to have conversations. It was no different. It's no different. It's simply being willing to have conversations about things that come up. And this should be your first step every time you get in a conversation. I often say this to people just to reassure them. I say, just so you know, you can't offend me. I refuse to be offended. You can make fun of my faith. You can say I'm an idiot. Totally get it. So the approach has to be, your approach, every one of you has to be, I'm not gonna get defensive. I'm not on the defense here. So it's not, you're attacking me, how could you? What? No, right? Listen, I'm trying to have a better understanding of where you're at, and what we're talking about is how can I best represent my faith and my understanding of the world and hear theirs and try to have some sort of influence. I'm trying to influence. I'm not trying to win or battle, right? Or get defensive. So it's really easy, and Christians are, man, we're so good at this. We see a shirt, a bumper sticker, a bracelet, I believe in science, and we're like, blah, 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 how could you? And you're like, what? Boy, that didn't take much to upset you. Like, okay, I'm gonna offend you right now. Is your faith so fragile that a t-shirt got under your skin? That a saying, that a word someone used offended you? Oh, come on. You gotta have more, like you gotta have more gut in you than that, all right? You gotta be able to take it, okay. So my approach is always, there's nothing you say that could offend me or upset me. Now, I'm not gonna agree with it, but I want you to share freely. Seriously? Yeah, you could share honestly. Go for it. And there's a level of like almost disarming, like, hey, I'm putting my weapons down here. I'm not getting upset and gonna get angry. You'll never hear me yell. I'm not gonna get defensive. And then they're like, all right, I can do the same thing. And then we have a talk, all right. So if your approach is, hey, I saw you that I believe in science bracelet, and your response is like, so is that like kind of like your religion? Okay. It's probably not gonna go well, right? And depending how well you know them, like if they're your colleagues and friends, and be like, hey, I see you wearing that a lot. What does that mean? Like, what is that? Right? You're doing the like, what does that mean? Like, tell me about that. Like, what do you mean by that? I'm just curious, like, I believe in science. What does that mean? Like, is that like, I mean, I'm assuming we all here believe in science, myself included, but I'm just curious, like, you choose to wear that. I'm curious, what does that mean? And then they'll probably say something that you already expect, something like, well, I believe in reason and logic and science, not faith. And so I hate religious people, and Christians will be like, oh, okay, well, I'm one of those. And just like, oh, and be like, now here's the deal. I believe in science too, so like, I think that's a great bracelet. Can you buy me? You got an extra one, right? Like, and the goal is not to start a fight, but rather to go, oh, wow. Like my goal is always to as best I can, let them see that their view and my view are not so far apart, and that they too can believe like I do, and you don't have to sacrifice like your reason and your thinking and your intellect and be like, well, to be a Christian, I gotta be anti-science. What? Oh man, I'm sorry. Let me apologize on behalf of all Christians that you think that's required, because I believe in science. And yet I also believe in Jesus. And I know it's weird. And if you ever have questions, how that works, I'd love to chat. But also, I'm not trying to condemn you or start a fight. And that's the approach. It's like, all right, hey, we can have that chat. And then here's the deal, though. If you ever do have a conversation, you can't get offended and like defensive, because one time, and they're like, knew that, I knew it. Yep, you're definitely not a safe person to talk to. So I always like, in those kinds of, I try and lean into whatever the thing is and be like, hey, I'm curious, what is that? Or, I think, why do you wear that? Or what does that mean to you? Like, that's interesting, or whatever. Or I see a bunch of people wearing it. What does that mean? And just see where it goes. Does that help? You got a follow-up question? Or no? You feel good? All right. Great. Do I see? Oh, okay, great.
This is more of a quick comment. Over the years, several years really.
How quick?
I've
When you
run
say
across
quick
people-
comment,
Okay.
is this like a 10-minute or
No,
just kidding?
I can make it go 10 minutes.
No, we don't. It's fine. Yeah, leave that to me, sir, okay?
Okay. Run across science people, especially over the creation of the planets and the universe. You still run across people who believe in the Big Bang thing. I ask them this: well, if a bunch of things blew up and all of a sudden we got planets and the universe, well, the things that blew up, where did they come from?
What do you think, Brandon?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked. Okay. all right, so let's talk. You want to talk about Big Bang? Okay, here we go. For you, sir, the one. I had someone come to me once, and they're in the science world, in like their job and stuff, and someone brought up that they don't believe, they're not a person of faith, they're not religious, and they're like, well, how do you think this whole life came to be? And like, well, I believe in the Big Bang. And this person said, well, I don't believe in that. I think that's a bunch of made up science. And I'm like, oh. They're like, I did the right thing, right? And I said, well, I believe in the Big Bang. Dang, okay, well, whoops. And I said, the Big Bang is not a problem. The Big Bang sounds an awful lot like Genesis chapter 1. That in the beginning, there was nothing, and then there was everything. The Big Bang is not like, Einstein was famous for believing that the universe was eternal until they created a telescope large enough to recognize and to see, oh, shoot. Things seem to be expanding. The universe seems to be expanding and moving away. And he denied it for a while, and then it finally came, like he had to go see it for himself, and then he reluctantly admitted that the universe has a beginning. And the reason it was reluctant was because that means something or someone, somehow it had to start. Something had to start it. And I'm uncomfortable thinking about what that could be. The Big Bang is not something that we go like, you believe in the Big Bang? You'd be like, awesome. Like, I don't want to weird you out, but you're almost a Christian. And you could joke around like that, be like, what? And be like, no, man, seriously, like, I don't mean you're a Christian, but I believe in the Big Bang, absolutely. Mike, that is how I believe it all started, was that, that God spoke and out of nothing came everything. And in an instant, it all came into existence and it's expanding. And what we see is exactly what we would imagine we would see if everything came into an existence in an instant and in a moment. And it's been expanding ever since. The Big Bang is not a problem for us. The Big Bang is a real problem for the scientist who's trying to say, well, how did it start, right? The question of like, okay, well, there's amino acids and there was this primordial soup and there was lightning and you're going, stop. Where'd all that come from, right? And so then I understand like the quantum theory, and we're getting to like in string theory and even like multiple universes, and you're like, okay, listen, we're getting really elaborate. I totally get it. And atoms can pop into existence from nothing, and you're like, okay, I get it. But everything like this, okay, all right. So when we think about like what science, like when we say science, wherever science lands on, like we should take it seriously and say, all right, how does this make sense with my understanding of who God is and what he says about everything? And instead of as a threat or like, does that make, you know what I'm saying? Right? Because the goal, like my goal is to say like, well, where are you at, where I'm at, where do we agree, and then where do we differ? And say like, hey, I agree with you, like we're actually not that far apart, but here's where maybe I see things a little different, and it's a conversation instead of a, I'm right, you're wrong. You've tried the I'm right, you're wrong, and it didn't go well. And you still try it with your spouse, and it's still not going great. Okay, so thank you for asking my thoughts again. Yeah. Oh, my buddy. What's up, man? How are you?
So, yes, of course, we can go infinite regression on anything. Where did God come from? Is the same as asking where did the Big Bang come from. None of that gets us to Christianity per se.
Correct.
I am curious. I guess if I were to formulate a question, I'd ask, Galileo was shown the implements of torture as far as religion countering or pushing back against science. Newton resisted speaking out against the Trinity because he saw Thomas Aikenhead hanged in his time. So since the Enlightenment, the last school of Athens was shut down by Justinian in 532. We went into 1,200 years of the Dark Ages, and it took until the Enlightenment to reemerge Greek philosophy. Since then, we hide the name God behind supernatural. And of course, you cannot find supernatural by science. So science doesn't disprove God, it makes it harder for it to hide. So projecting 1,000 or 2,000 years from now, when God has run out of places to hide, I mean, we don't need the God of thunder or fertility anymore. Once God is out of places to hide, would you consider it a sin to have stultified human development in the search of supernatural?
Say that last part again. What I consider it a sin to what?
Would you consider it a sin to have stultified human development in pursuit of the supernatural?
Oh, okay. A sin. No.
Against humanity.
Would I consider it a sin against humanity?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my first response is going to be tongue-in-cheek. That's my warning, okay? I didn't do any of that against humanity. That was a joke, okay. But a sin.
You are the pastor, right?
Yeah. Well, but I didn't.
Just check.
I haven't stopped any through acts or threat of torture against anyone to not
No, but
think
by
scientifically.
presuming to teach.
I'm sorry.
But by presuming to teach.
Presuming to teach?
Yes, by presuming to teach things about the supernatural, you
Yeah.
stultify progress via science.
Yeah, but doesn't that presuppose? Aren't you presupposing that there is no God and this is what we're talking about?
No, not
Hold on.
presupposing there's no God. It's defining God as supernatural, as something science cannot research.
Yeah, but you could say this, every serious theologian or perspective, a religious perspective, would define God that way. When we say like the divine or God, this is the ontological argument that by definition, he has to be those things. So if we say, when we think of God as being supernatural, we say that because that is what our understanding and definition and what our Bible, the holy books, how they describe this being. So it's not me getting on a stage saying, hey guys, he's a guy, but let's just say he's supernatural. So like the scriptures describe, you know this, describe Yahweh in ways that are outside of this world. Jesus says that God is spirit. And so if the argument is God is not supernatural, you would have to defend that claim, right? Now you and I we'll probably talk after this for another 2.5 hours like last time. And I honestly, I enjoyed our talk, so I look forward to it. But your question got to a conclusion that you haven't set up yet. So your conclusion was, Christianity has done this thing to humanity. Are you sorry for it?
No, religion.
Okay, religion, sure. Religion has done this to humanity. When are you guys gonna apologize? And I'm saying, like you say, do you consider it a sin? Like, so like, all right, you're saying, do you think you're wrong for doing all these things? And I'm going, hey, you have to build a case before we get to the point where I recognize that I have done some sort of harm against Christianity, against the world. If that makes sense.
Heretics and burning witches for 1,200 years, but instead worked off what the Greeks had developed 300 BC instead of chasing.
Okay. So now my tongue-in-cheek answer is actually my answer. That as a Christ follower, I have done no such thing, and I don't know anyone who has. But I can also condemn those who did do those things. Like I can look back and say, the Christians who did those things were wrong. Like Calvin, John Calvin was notorious for this. Like it was well known that like, hey man, it was not great. I don't look back at the life and say, you did these things, therefore God doesn't exist. Well, you did these things, like the Crusades happened, therefore the logical arguments for God are invalid. Does that make sense? So I can look back at someone's life and say, hey, this is wrong and evil and terrible, and also my faith is still intact.
Yes, but do you think they thought it was wrong? In 200 years,
I probably not.
Look back at you and see resistance of stem cell research or oppression of women's rights or LGBTQ. And go, wow, backwards.
So you're conflating, I think, two things. So the actions of individuals in the past and now the collective guilt of Christianity because certain Christians oppose stem cell research and vice versa. So we're being lumped, you're lumping me into this group, right? And
No,
saying
I'm
like, you
encouraging
guys
the
are doing this.
self-awareness to identify that what those people thought burning a witch purified the community they thought was right.
Yeah.
Thinking where you're at right now,
But
in
you-
lieu
but-
of the fact we've got 2,000 years of failed prophecy, might be worth a check
For me.
for Christians in general.
Yeah, so your statement is, should Christians feel like they are sinning because
If it is retarding
hold on.
human progress
Yeah,
by continuing a claim that I don't think the man himself ever made.
yeah. Okay. So we're gonna talk after this, I hope. I hope you got time to stick around. So this is your claim. Are Christians sinning because they don't agree with your perspective of what's going on? But those are your views. These are your views, right? And so you would have to say, I believe this is what you guys are doing, and here's why. Do you think you're wrong for it? And I'm saying, hold on. If it's a matter of looking at the crimes against humanity,
Let's phrase it, if Paul could have known that 2,000 years from his time, Jesus would still not have come back, would he have told women to cover up, gays that they're wrong,
Yeah.
and all the rest that we've suffered for 2,000 years? Or was Paul wrong and didn't understand what Jesus was about?
Yeah. All right, let's talk afterward because I don't want to leave everyone here. But I know your perspective on Paul. I know you're not a fan of Paul. So I know you don't like Paul. So I will only quote Paul to you. Just kidding. Let's talk afterward, okay? All right, let's wrap up. Let me pray, and then you'll all be dismissed except for my friend Alex. So Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you that we can engage in big questions with our minds and intellectually and come to understand our faith as certainly not being anti-science, but rather to look at our world and say, this is the world you created. Help us to better understand who you are and what we can learn and know about you because of our world. So help us to have better, gracious, engaging conversations and to do so with, like your word says, with gentleness and humility. We love you, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Hey, thanks for this. And now here's the bad news. Oh, it's summer. We take a break for summer. So I know that this is the favorite thing you do in life, but we will have to take a break. That being said, you can't leave your kids here for summer. You got to go get them. So get your kids, and then we certainly will be meeting this Sunday for Mother's Day. And so God bless. Thanks for being here, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday.